Okay, we're right at the top of the hour. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. I'm Leo, and I'm a recovered alcoholic. We kind of start this off with the third step prayer. Rob, if you would help us.
I certainly will. I'm Rob K., recovered alcoholic, and great to see everybody this morning. We're going to do the third step prayer. It's on page 63 of your big book if you want to follow along. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, the victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Excellent, Rob. Thank you. We are in the chapter more about alcoholism, and I'm going to back up just slightly. Rob, we'll start back at page 34 at the very bottom, that first or that last paragraph. How then?
Page 34, everybody. How then shall we help our readers determine to their own satisfaction whether they are one of us? The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render an even greater service to alcoholic sufferers and perhaps to the medical fraternity. We shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking, for obviously this is the crux of the problem.
Certainly so. And just a couple of notes here. This first part, that how then shall we determine to their own satisfaction whether they are one of us. This is good for a sponsor to be familiar with, because undoubtedly you're going to be faced with that question. You know, how do I know I'm an alcoholic, or what makes you an alcoholic? That type of thing. And this is an excellent section to review with a newcomer. So just wanted to kind of put that plug in there for those that are sponsoring, and how they can address that initial question that comes up. And I say that only because I that was one of my first things that I did. Now my motives were not good. I was trying to be facetious and a little bit snide about it, but nonetheless, I kept asking, what makes you an alcoholic? What's the definition of an alcoholic, and how do you know you're an alcoholic? Kind of thing. And I literally asked those questions, and I repeat this a couple of times in the past, but it was interesting that not one person picked up the big book and said, well, let's talk about it. They just tried to describe it as, well, I've got 2 DUIs, or I drink alone. And I kept saying, yeah, I get that, I see that, but does that make you an alcoholic? And again, I just wanted to. It was at a time when I didn't want to admit that I was, in fact, an alcoholic, but I did want to know what it was. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with that first paragraph in page 35, Rob.
You got it, Leo. What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree, which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy, are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Why does he? What is he thinking?
Absolutely. And it's really this is the precursor to that question. And it is very much, people recognize that you, in fact, have a problem way before you actually either recognize or even acknowledge that you have a problem. And so I think that this is good, because there is the fact that I was facing things, and I was facing a lot of problems in my own life with relationships, especially. And I think that really had an impact on me as I finally discovered that I was an alcoholic, and started my journey. Rob?
Okay. Our first example was a friend we shall call Jim. We're on page 35, Brian. This man has a charming wife and family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He had a commendable World War record. He is a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He is an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. He did no drinking until he was 35. In a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. On leaving the asylum, he came into contact with us.
So we're going to go ahead and just keep going, Rob, on this. This is kind of just an introduction of a particular person. And I guess what I will say for this is that, it doesn't matter how smart you are, alcoholics are alcoholics. So that's something that I think is important here. The other thing too is that a lot of alcoholics, at least in the beginning of their disease, where it's finally starting to take control, are still very good at what they do, whether that be their jobs, their relationships, etc. And they can kind of hold it together in the beginning. But as you'll see, as this disease progresses, that's not so. And it's interesting too that some people wait before they start drinking, or as they start drinking, it's usually very social, very very limited, and we'll also see how that is just the beginnings of it grabbing a hold of a particular person. But it's interesting too, because there's the different kinds of drunks, not just, in the, whether you're an alcoholic or not, but, alcohol affects you in different ways. And I think we're going to see that as well. In this case, this person was not a very good or nice drunk. There's the what I call the I love you man kind of guy that puts his arm around you, and he's kind of sob story kind of man. I'm just you're my best friend, and I couldn't do things without you kind of thing. And others are very very angry, and obviously in this case, this particular guy became violent. So just kind of think in terms of the different kinds. This is just one example. It's not the only example, and I think that you can kind of fit yourself into some of these things as we kind of read along.
Perfect, Leo. This gentleman, Jim's real name is Ralph Furlong. His story was on page 357 of the first edition. We told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer we had found. He made a beginning. His family was reassembled, and he began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. To his consternation, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. He agreed he was a real alcoholic and in a serious condition. He knew he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. Moreover, he would lose his family, for whom he had a great, deep affection. Yet, he got drunk again. We asked him to tell us exactly how it happened. This is his story. I came to work on Tuesday morning. I remember I felt irritated that I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned. I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious. Then I decided to drive into the country and see one of my prospects for a car. On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. I had no intention of drinking. I just thought I would get a sandwich. I also had the notion that I might find a customer for the car at this place, which was familiar, for I'd been going to it for years. I'd eaten there many times during the months I was sober. I sat down at a table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Still no thought of drinking. I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk.
Absolutely. So one of the important things here is this particular guy has stopped drinking. He's been for a while. He hasn't been drinking. He's found himself out doing his job. He's probably had a little bit of, when he says he has words with his boss and stuff like that, nothing too serious and that type of thing. But you can imagine a guy, in this case, who actually owned that business, now has lost that business, and he's now working for the person he lost the business to. And I can only imagine how almost embarrassing that is, and or how hard that is for a particular person to say, this used to be mine and now it's somebody else's. And right now, and interestingly enough, he's chosen to work for the same company that he obviously used to own. And I'm guessing that, he probably had certain privileges that, won't normally be afforded somebody had they not, in this case, owned the business prior. So, a lot of latitude had been given this gentleman to be able to do what he's doing. Now fast forward here to now he's out, he's, planning on calling on somebody, he's doing his job, he stops by this roadside diner, and he's going to have a sandwich and some milk. And obviously, he has no plans, no intention whatsoever to drink. And I think that's an important factor here. There's no intention of going in and drinking. The other thing that I want to bring up is that we're actually recognizing a lot of the steps in his story as well. The way that Bill has woven into this steps 1 through 3, and really kind of 4 through 12, if you will, in regards to some of the things going on. But back at the beginning we told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer we had found, and then he made a beginning. Well, that's really kind of the first 3 steps in the process. So Jim is definitely working on the steps, but he is still in that what I call the risk period of relapsing. But I think the important note here is he's got no intention whatsoever to drink. Rob?
Very good point. And the other thing that I want to bring out is that he found himself drunk half a dozen times on rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him. They didn't give up on him. They didn't say, I can't sponsor you because you don't want to give up drinking. They worked with him each and every time he failed, he relapsed. We have to remember that at times, that, you know what, we don't always get it on the first go.
And real quick, Rob, I don't mean to interrupt, but that's I think times have changed a little bit, and I think it's time to kind of acknowledge that, people, I was a relapser. I would do 30 days. I did that twice in a row, and I drank on the 31st day. It was just something that clicked, and I had no intention of doing it. I literally celebrated my 30th day, and it was within an hour or 3, somewhere in that time frame, that I drank again. And it was baffling to an extent, but I was appreciative of the fact that when I talked to my sponsor at the time, he said, look, Leo, let's keep, do you really want to quit? And I said, yes, I really want to quit. And it was, hey, he's going to stick with me. So there are people that will tell you that if you drink, I'm not working with you. And I think to myself that that's a bit selfish and a bit one-sided. And I think that we need to, as sponsors, make sure that we understand the newcomers, we understand the people that are trying to quit. And if they really are truly trying to quit, and you'll know it, don't abandon them, because otherwise you may have just triggered something in them that makes them go back to drinking and they never come back. So I think it's an important distinction. Now, obviously, if somebody is just telling you, I really don't want to quit, I'm not there yet, et cetera, you can make yourself available in the future. And again, we talk about don't waste your time with somebody that doesn't want to quit, but you've got to really dig into that and really get to know your new sponsee as to whether or not they want to. And if they really do want to, I hope you did make the decision to keep working with them.
Exactly. And we're going to come up on some squiggly writing here, so it's got to be important. So we're on page 36, everybody. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. I ordered a whiskey and poured it into milk. I vaguely sensed I was not being any too smart, but felt reassured as I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. The experiment went so well that I ordered another whiskey and poured it into more milk. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another.
Yeah, and really the big message here is the suddenly, and I've underlined that and highlighted it, and it is the insanity. It's that malady, that defense against the first drink. And right now he is basically expressed in very good terms of how it just hits you without even thinking about it. Next thing you know, you're bringing up a glass that has alcohol in it up to your lips and you're drinking. So it's that's really the important message here, is that malady, that insanity, that defense against the first drink just wasn't there. So
sound reasoning couldn't keep him in check. Thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. Here was the threat of commitment, the loss of family and position, to say nothing of that intense mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused him. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic. Yet all reasons for not drinking, were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if only he mixed it with milk.
Absolutely. And really, this is knowledge does not fix me. I've written that as a statement underneath this passage right here. Knowledge does not fix me. All right. And so you can't fix self with self-knowledge. You can't fix self with self. And that's an important thing to make that distinction. And, you know, it's right there. Yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if only he had mixed it with milk. It's that old thing. If I just drink beer instead of whiskey, or if I only drink on Fridays and Saturdays, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, Rob.
Yeah, Bill had the idea that self-knowledge, after he came out of treatment for the first time, thought self-knowledge would fix him this time. Didn't last very long for him either, unfortunately. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportion of the inability to think straight be called anything else? You may think this is an extreme case. To us, it is not, far-fetched. But this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences. But there was always the curious mental phenomenon that parallel with our sound reasoning, there inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. The insane idea won out. The next day, we would ask ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity how it could have happened.
Okay, so there's a couple of things here. One is the biggest thing I want to make sure is that from whatever the precise definition of the word may be, all the way down to how it could have happened, is probably the best definition you're going to find to the malady. And I would just highlight that whole passage right there. And if anybody asks you for a definition of the malady, this is a great place to express that. And the sound reasoning failed us to hold us in check. The insane idea won out. There's the malady. And then the next day, we would ask ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity how it could have happened. That's a baffling feature of alcoholism. That's when we talk about it being baffling. It's just, how the heck did I get here, and how the heck did I end up with what just happened in the night before, the day before, the time before, whatever that period of time is. But this is an excellent definition of the malady. Rob?
Beautiful. In some circumstances, we have gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, or the like. But even in this type of beginning, we're obliged to admit that our justification for a spree was insanely insufficient in the light of what always happened. We now see that when we began to drink deliberately instead of casually, there was little serious or effective thought during the period of premeditation of what the terrific consequences might be.
Yeah, I call this the heckets. And so it's like, oh, heck it, I'm gonna drink because whatever it is, X, Y, or Z. I outlined the anger. I was frustrated in the beginning. I had words with my wife, and I remember the exact incident that happened. I got in my car, I drove to a local bar, and I basically sat there and I didn't eat. I just drank. And thank goodness my wife thought well enough to come and meet me there. She was very accommodating at the time, and we did in fact have dinner. And then she drove home. It was a big help in that regards. Now, that doesn't mean that we, were getting along very well at that moment and everything, because obviously I was acting out. I was angry and unjustifiably angry at everything. But it was the last time, and I remember this distinctly, it was the last time that I had the heckets and went out and purposely did something which was drinking, because I was just upset with whatever the situation was. And I'll be honest, I'm sure we were arguing over my drinking, but we were definitely arguing about something. And I can tell you that I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was enough that I threw caution to the wind and took the risk, and ended up finding myself doing the absolutely wrong thing. And and the justification for a spree was insanely insufficient. I had no good excuse whatsoever for going out and drinking. In fact, I was doing it in spite, and that was for absolutely the wrong reason, period. Rob?
Our behavior is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to that first drink as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, you would label him as a foolish chap having queer ideas for fun. Luck then deserts him, and he is slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently, he is hit again, and this time has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you he has decided to stop jaywalking for good, but in a few weeks, he breaks both legs. On through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he can no longer work. His wife gets a divorce and is held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to mend his ways. But the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he?
Yeah, it sounds absurd. It sounds crazy, but the fact is that this, if you were to just interchange drinking alcohol in place of every time this man jaywalked, I would tell you that is, to almost a T, describes at least half of us in some form or fashion as to how we approached our drinking, especially at the very end and everything. It's just uncanny how you could exchange, the jaywalking terminology with drinking, and there you go, you've got it. And so, yeah, when you take it in this context, it sounds absurd, and that's another thing. This is an excellent place for a sponsor to take this passage that we just read and say, let's interchange some drinking terms in here, and let's see just how it looks. You read this passage first as is, then you go back and read it with the drinking terminology in it, and all of a sudden the light bulb comes on and you go, holy cow. At first I thought this sounded crazy, but now when you put it in terms that I understand it, it doesn't sound so crazy at all. In fact, it is dead on for a lot of people. So very much a great it levels the playing field, if you will, for a person that's being resistant to the idea that they might be alcoholic. Rob?
Leo, I love the fact that Bill bringing into these, I'll call them case studies, or these stories about people. It just shows the insanity of us drinking. And we expect to get different results. But, we keep doing this same thing, but we keep telling ourselves, this time is going to be different. And Bill from New Jersey always said, the brain wants its candy, and it will tell you anything for you to take that candy. And boy, that melody is like that. It'll tell me anything for me to take that first drink, and then I'm off to the races with the allergy. You may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit, if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us perfectly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true?
We'll keep going, Rob.
Some of you are thinking, yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. We admit we have some of these symptoms, but we have not gone to the extremes you fellows did, nor are we likely to, for we understand ourselves so well after what you have told us that such things cannot happen again. We have not lost everything in life through drinking, and we certainly do not intend to. Thank you for the information.
Yeah. Remember, and I wrote a note here to myself in this particular paragraph, remember that you are learning about alcoholism. All right. We're still learning at this point. So obviously you're probably not completely there if you are the alcoholic that's fine, that's going through this for the first time with your sponsor. So, this is something that a sponsor might hear from their from their sponsee or somebody that they're working with as a newcomer, and just remember that they're still learning about alcoholism. Rob?
Well, this is a great point where the guy says, thanks for the information. We've planted a seed. Now we move on to the next alcoholic who really wants it. This gentleman will come back to us. We've planted the seed. If he really wants it, he'll come back. So we've planted the seed. We move on right now. That may be true of certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have not been damaged as ours were. But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize, to smash home upon our alcoholic readers as it has been revealed to us out of bitter experience. Let us take another illustration.
Yeah, just real quickly, not much to overemphasize other than to just say it again, but the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. And just please overemphasize that point with respect to the newcomer, the person learning about alcoholism, and just say, look, you're gaining a few things about alcoholism. Just because you gain that doesn't mean that you're you're in the clear. So just remember that there's still more work to be done, and the work is definitely there, and the answers are in this book. But the idea is that we have to emphasize it and re-emphasize it, because I, just like anybody else, is going to take what I know and say, oh, I've got it now. I know what an alcoholic is, and I can control this because I, was good at this, and I was good at that, and I was good at something else. And so therefore I can pick this up with, and I can run with it, and I'm going to be just fine. No. All right, Rob?
Well, if you didn't get it when Bill said, came out of treatment for the first time, if you didn't get it when Roland went to Dr. Young and Dr. Young told him about self-knowledge, and if you didn't get it when he just told it, they're going to emphasize and re-emphasize. They're going to say the same thing over and over again, so you don't forget. Because remember, we can't remember. Remember, Fred is a partner in a well-known accounting firm. His income is good. He has a fine home, is happily married, and the father of promising children of college age. He has so attractive a personality that he makes friends with everyone. If ever there was a successful businessman, it is Fred. To all appearances, he is a stable, well-balanced individual, yet he is alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he had gone to recover from a bad case of jitters. It was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed of it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. The doctor intimated strongly that he might be worse than he realized. For a few days, he was depressed about his condition. He made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so. In spite of his character and standing, Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic, much less accept the spiritual remedy for his problems. We told him what we knew about alcoholism. He was interested and conceded that he had some of the symptoms, but he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about it himself. He was positive that this humiliating experience, plus the knowledge he had acquired, would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it.
Okay, and I made a note there at the very end that self-knowledge would fix it, as put, not for a real alcoholic. So right now, we just basically have described what we've just been talking about, so I won't talk about it much, but here's a classic example of a guy that's successful in all his endeavors beyond his drinking, and he has admitted that he has a problem drinking, but he's not an alcoholic, and that he figures that with his now new knowledge of what alcoholism is, that he is in fact going to be able to stop drinking and stay stopped on his own. So again, I appreciate you guys coming and talking to me. Thank you very much. I'm going to be just fine. Gives him a big thumbs up and a big smile, and he's got that false confidence that I'm sure that a lot of us have had at times, and there you go. Rob?
Self-knowledge won't fix it. And he also conceded that he had some of the symptoms, but was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about it himself. We heard no more of Fred for a while. One day we were told that he was back in the hospital. This time he was quite shaky. He soon indicated he was anxious to see us. The story he told is most instructive, for here was a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking, who had no excuse for drinking, who exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all his other concerns, yet was flat on his back nevertheless. Let him tell you about it. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink, but I was confident it could not happen to me after what I had learned. I reasoned I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows that had been usually successful in licking my other personal problems, and that I would therefore be successful where you men failed. I felt I had every right to be self-confident, that it would only be a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard.
I will admit to you that I felt the same way, and was very much in the same place that this gentleman is, Fred. And I would just admit to you that I appreciated the ideas. I figured I was going to be able to control my drinking, and not drink at all. In fact, I could push it away and be just fine because, again, I was successful in other areas. But I didn't want to also admit that I was alcoholic. And I think that really what you draw from this is just a reinforcement. The bottom line is that the well, I've lost my train of thought there. Point being is that here's a good way to bring a person along that is a newcomer. And as a sponsor, the point being is that take them through this section and really take it slowly with them, and let them talk, let them kind of relay their own story, and if you can interweave their own story into Fred's story, and make it what it is. All right. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, just in that one paragraph, I think I is used about 11 times. I thought I could control. I thought I could do this. I thought I could do that. Everything is I. You know, he thinks he can do it by himself. Self-knowledge will fix it. And he's going to keep on guard. Now, when we get to page 41, you'll see what happens to his guard. In this frame of mind, I went about my business for a time. All was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks, and began to wonder if I had not been making too hard work of a simple matter. One day I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. I had been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about that. Physically, I felt fine. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. I was pleased and knew my partners would be too. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon.
We'll just keep going, Rob. This is just a good precursor as to what's about to hit, and let's call it the calm before the storm.
That sounds good. I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all. Nothing more. I ordered a cocktail on my meal. Then I ordered another cocktail. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball would be fine before going to bed. So I stepped into the bar and had one. I remember having several more that night and plenty next morning. I have a shadowy recollection of being in an airplane bound for New York and of finding a friendly taxi cab driver at the landing field instead of my wife. The driver escorted me about for several days. I know little of where I went or what I said and did. Then came the hospital with unbearable mental and physical suffering.
All right, so a couple of things here is this powerlessness over alcohol. At the beginning of this passage, I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came up to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. There's the malady, that plain insanity that we've got. And then I ordered another cocktail. After dinner, I decided to take a walk, and then it struck me that it would be fine to have a highball before bed. There's the allergy. It's just not able to stop drinking, and the allergy obviously takes hold. I'll admit to you that I was on a business trip once I was drinking prior to my flight. I vaguely remember the flight, so I can I can relate to this almost exactly. And when I got to my car, I thought that the airlines had lost a suit because I was not dressed in the suit anymore, and I don't remember changing clothes. I have no recollection of me changing clothes, and I was calling and telling them that they've lost my suit. And then it wasn't until I got to my trunk and I started digging through my stuff, finally, after probably 5 phone calls about my suit being lost, that I found this wadded up suit in one of my suitcases. And there it was, where I had just put it. So I tell you that to say that this is not far off, and that there are some of us that have had almost an exact experience with it. The good news is that I did end up getting home right when I was supposed to, and 2, I did not end up in a hospital. I might have should have ended up, in a treatment center, but I did have an experience that was almost word for word just like this. So anyway, I bring that up just to tell you that there's some realism to this as well for some of us that can relate almost exactly to what this was. So anyway, Rob.
This gentleman, his business went really well. Then when I think back on Bill's story, Bill's business went terrible. He walked by the hotel bar, thought, well, I could go in for a ginger ale. Well, maybe I can go in for a couple of drinks. They've been sober for 6 months now. But what did Bill do? He went to the hotel lobby, picked up the phone and called Reverend Tunks, who gave him Henrietta Sieberling's phone number, who gave him Dr. Bob's phone number. And, his path was clear. Go help another alcoholic. This gentleman, well, unfortunately, he wasn't as smart as Bill. Also, I love the fact that he found a friendly taxi driver in New York, who escorted him for a few days. Didn't escort him for an hour or two, escorted him for a few days. As my friend Bill from New Jersey said, New York taxi drivers know where everything is, where whatever you need, they know where to get it. And so if this gentleman was escorted around for a few days, he was doing more than just alcohol. As soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time, I had not thought of the consequences at all. I had commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. I now remembered what my alcoholic friends had told me, how they prophesied that if I had an alcoholic mind, the time and place would come. I would drink again. They had said that though I did raise a defense, it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink. Well, just that did happen and more. For what I'd learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment that I had an alcoholic mind. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. I'd never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow.
Yeah, there's a couple of things here. First of all, he talks about the malady several times. Second, he talks about the allergy several times. I mean, and it's also about this self-knowledge that, I can fix self with self, and it's just not going to happen. And I saw that the willpower and the self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. And I had never been able to understand people who said that the problem with them was hopelessly defeated. And then, I knew then it was a crushing blow. This is really his step one. It's his admission that they are alcoholic, and he finally is admitting to the fact that he is defeated, that he is an alcoholic, and he is powerless over alcohol. And so essentially this is basically the admission of a person to their step one. Rob?
2 of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned, which I didn't like so much, and then asked me if I thought myself alcoholic and if I would really lick this time. I had to concede both propositions. They piled on me heaps of evidence to the effect that an alcoholic mentality, such as I had exhibited in Washington, was a hopeless condition. They cited cases out of their own experience by the dozen. This process snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself.
Yep. So a couple of things here. The hopeless condition. He's admitting to that. He's recognizing it, and he is understanding it. Okay. That's a big piece. He understands it. the second thing I think that's really important here, and it's so vague that you could almost gloss over it, but they cited cases of their own experience by the dozen. They're not talking about him right now. They're talking about their experiences, okay? And that's an important distinction here, in that you are trying to gain the support and the you're trying to gain the person's confidence, okay? And so by relating your experiences, you're basically telling the person that you understand what they're going through, because inevitably there's going to be one out of three of their experiences are going to be relatable to that person. So very important point here. They weren't talking about his experiences, because then it's singular, it's him, and he's not gaining that confidence that they really know what he's going through. But by sharing their experiences, they're persuading him through involvement. All right. So remember my threes. It's the focus on the customer, in this case, focus on the alcoholic. Two is earn the right, persuade through involvement. And that's what they're doing by relating their own stories. And three, they earn the right to advance to the next thing. And that is, they ask that very thing, is that if I were really licked this time, I thought myself alcoholic, and if I was really licked this time, yes, I do think I'm an alcoholic, and yes, I'm licked. And so then they were like, okay, let's go to the next step. And that's what they did. So that's I've talked about this for a few of you who've been with me for a while. That is that focus on the alcoholic, persuade them through involvement, and earn the right to advance. And as you kind of do that, you will bring them along and they will become believers. Rob?
I like page 18. But the ex-prolonged drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished.
Yep. And that's the italicized version or portion on page 18, if you want to make a reference to that as a side note on this passage.
And
Thanks,
now
Rob.
we're back on page 42. Then they outlined the spiritual answer and program of action, which 100 of them had followed successfully. Though it had been only a nominal churchman, their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow. But the program of action, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. It meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. That was not easy. But the moment I made up my mind to go through with the process, I had the curious feeling that my alcohol condition was relieved, as in fact it proved to be.
Yep. So absolutely. Then outline the spiritual answer and program of action, which 100 of them had followed. Okay, we're talking about their program and not his own. He's going to adapt to their program. And really, basically, what this is the step 2 and more. All right. So they're kind of moving on through the steps very methodically. And the other idea here is that a nominal churchman, their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow. And remember here, we're gonna talk about the agnostic, the atheist, and the true believer. I think is also a member of the next chapter that we're going to be going into. But nonetheless, they are starting to talk about that spiritual experience and having that to as the answer to finding that inner strength of being able to stop drinking. All right, and at the program of action, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. It's a big change for people. It's a major upheaval of your own thinking and the way that you approach all parts of your life. But the moment they made up their mind to go through the process, I had the curious feeling that my alcoholic condition was relieved, as in fact it proved to be. All right. And we all have that moment, whether it's the epiphany and it comes rushing over you, or if it's where it was for me was kind of the educational kind, where it was slowly, step by step. And then after a period of time, I kind of went, what I've just done over the last 4 to 6 weeks, I have found that now I've got a newfound confidence that I'm going to be able to overcome this because I have found my higher power and I've had that experience, and we're good to go. So with that, just kind of thinking in terms of your own, as well as how you might express or explain this to a newcomer. Rob?
Quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all of my problems. I have since been brought into a way of living infinitely more satisfying, and I hope more useful than the life I had lived before. My old manner of life was by no means a bad one, but would not exchange its best moment for the worst I have now. I would not go back to it even if I could.
Yeah, and it's kind of the thing here is that the very beginning there, quite as important, was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. And just what we're talking about are the resentments, the angers, the fears, things like that that you can apply to that. So if you've got somebody saying, well, what do you mean all my problems? This is a great time to kind of do a planting of a seed. And we're talking about the resentments, their angers, their fears, etc. Those type of things are what we're talking about as to their problems. And the other thing I did write, and I think that, it says, I would not exchange my best moments for the worst I have now. I think that's a great place to be. I think it depends on the person. I only say that as I look back in my life, and there were some really super great moments when I was drinking, and they were normally, obviously, when I was sober. But I don't want to be so extreme here that I wouldn't have traded all of that for my worst times now. Your spiritual experience and the stop of drinking is certainly a highlight in your life, and it should be. And it is one of those greatest accomplishments ever in your life. But at the same time, there were other times in your life that you had some great accomplishments. And I just say that just to kind of qualify it a little bit. And this is more of a personal thing, just to let you know that I would just love to have had more of the best moments, and I'm very grateful that I've able to create those now in such a way that they're devoid of alcohol. Rob?
Fred's story speaks for itself. We hope it strikes home to thousands like him. He had felt only the first nip of the ringer. Most alcoholics have to be pretty badly mangled before they really commence to solve their problem.
Yeah, and this is really it's a really kind of talk about a couple of things. We talk about people that hit their bottom, wherever that bottom is. And you hear the terms, your low bottom. There's other people that hit a high bottom. The distinction is there, but it's really not fair. It is, everybody has their own bottom, whatever that bottom is. And pretty badly mangled. Remember in the beginning, they didn't, the word wasn't out like it is today, where you have some of those alcoholics that are they're alcoholic. They've been able to get the information sooner than some of these folks did, and they were able to admit to it and recover from their alcoholism before they lost everything. And a lot of these people that they had back in the 30s and early 40s, well, they were people that were in hospitals. They truly had lost a lot, whether they were Jim who lost his business, or if they were Fred on the brink of losing his family, et cetera, et cetera. They were getting medical care to deal with their alcoholism. And so they were in pretty bad shape. And this is the other thing that gets brought up here, is the consequences are what brings you to AA. Okay. We'll talk more about that as we go along throughout the rest of this book that we'll be reading. But it is the consequences that bring you to AA. It's, if you're just happy-go-lucky and you're not having any problems and you're drinking, you're not coming to AA because you're happy with your drinking. You're coming to AA because you're unhappy with your drinking. And the reason you're unhappy with your drinking is because you've been found out, you've been pointed out, et cetera. And so you've obviously had a few bad things happen to you. So it's that consequences that bring you to AA. Rob?
Many doctors and psychiatrists agree with our conclusions. One of these men, a staff member of a world-renowned hospital, recently made the statement to some of us: what you say about the general hopelessness of the average alcoholic's plight is, in my opinion, correct. As to two of you men whose stories I've heard, There is no doubt in my mind that you were 100% hopeless, apart from divine help. Had you offered yourselves as patients at this hospital, I would not have taken you if I had been able to avoid it. People like you are too heartbreaking. Though not a religious person, I have profound respect for the spiritual approach in such cases as yours. For most cases, there is virtually no other solution.
Yeah, we're talking about Dr. Silkworth here. That's talking to him, and it's just a reinforcement as to the fact that the medical community, in this case, Dr. Silkworth and his renowned hospital for addiction and alcoholics, that he was able to admit that even no matter what he had tried, it was hopeless for the medical side of things to cure people completely. They certainly did make them better. You take alcohol away, you give them some physical exercise, you give them some good meals, and you give them some counseling and everything. Over a period of time, they obviously will improve. But it is this this approach that that Bill and the others had with Alcoholics Anonymous that was the game changer for so many of us. Right?
Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power.
Okay, and that's just a precursor to getting our higher power, and it's something that we're going to definitely talk about as we go along and everything. I'm going to go ahead and stop there today. It's a couple minutes early, but I'm going to ask Bill if you'd like to share a few words.
Yeah, hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. Yeah, thanks a lot for the meeting, Leo and Rob. You guys did a good job here. This chapter has really a lot of information in it. And like Leo said, this is a really good thing to go through with your sponsor or your sponsee or whatever, because there's some real good information in here trying to explain what's going on with us. What Bill's doing, he's trying to show us the mental state. He's trying to show us the insanity of alcoholism. That's where the problem is. If we just had the allergy and that was the end of it, and we didn't have that problem in our head, once we got sober and we got sick and everything else, we would never drink again. That would be the end of it. But something in our brain makes us drink against our will. And that's the point he's trying to show us here. He talked about this guy, Jim, and like Leo pointed out, he did the first 3 steps, 1, 2, and 3, or the equivalent of what our 3 steps are. But that's where he stopped there. And it gives us a warning. It says he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. He didn't enlarge his spiritual life. That means he didn't go any further than 1, 2, and 3. And he wound up drunk a half a dozen times in a row. And each time they worked with him. In other words, we don't shoot our wounded. If somebody doesn't want to get sober, that's a whole different story. Because I've run into people in AA that don't want to be sober. They're just here because they got back problems. They're trying to get people off their back, their family or their boss or their wife or whatever. But if somebody wants it and they have a slip, those are the people that need the most help. We're not supposed to kick them to the curb. And they worked with this guy a half a dozen times in a row. And he had no intention of drinking, like Leo pointed out. When he went out to this roadside place, he had absolutely no intention of drinking. He did not want to drink. And then Bill's got it in italics. Suddenly, the thought came to mind, right out of the clear blue sky. That's what happens to us. Our brain short circuits. Something in our brain makes us drink against our will. I like to say your brain wants its candy. The brain is addicted to alcohol. And when you get to that point where your brain is addicted, your willpower and your common sense and your choice doesn't work because the addicted part of your brain is strong enough to bully the rest of your brain around. So that's basically what happened to this guy. His brain short-circuited and he drank against his will. And it said he had much knowledge, and knowledge can't fix me. No matter how much self-knowledge I have, that's not going to fix me. If you have a toothache and you go to the dentist will take an x-ray, and then the dentist will tell you why you have a toothache. Now you have knowledge of your toothache. You can get up and leave? No. All the knowledge does is it tells you what kind of treatment you need, whether you need it pulled or root canaled or drilled or filled or whatever the dentist is going to do. Knowledge doesn't fix anything. It just tells you that you need some kind of a remedy for what you have. And Bill calls this on page 37, he calls it plain insanity. This guy, Jim, he did not recognize the big lie that they talked about in The Man with 30. If you didn't drink for a certain period of time, you stay sober a little while, all of a sudden you can drink like a normal person. He thought if he mixed it with milk or if he had 2 sandwiches, he would be able to drink normal and it wouldn't hurt him. So again, Bill calls that plain insanity. That's what we have. Then he talks about this here jaywalker, and I think that's just like a fable that they made up just to put in here, just to prove a point, just so you can relate it to alcoholism. And then he talks about this guy Fred, and Fred should have was a smart guy. He was an accountant. He had his own business he was working in. Everything was going good for this guy. It was a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. That doesn't sound like hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Everything was going right for this guy. And what happened? He went to dinner and he got the crazy idea in his head. It'll be okay if I have a couple of cocktails with dinner. It won't hurt me. He didn't recognize the big lie either. He thought that because he was sober for a certain amount of time and because he was going to eat dinner, it would be okay and the alcohol wouldn't hurt him. We talked about Bill a little bit. Well, when he was ready to go into the bar and have 3 drinks, Bill recognized the lie, and he turned around and walked away. These 2 guys didn't recognize the lie. So basically what happens is our brain short circuits and tells us that it's okay to drink when we don't want to drink. And then the last paragraph in here, there's really, really good stuff in here. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. At certain times, that's the key. Sometimes we will have a defense against it, and sometimes we won't. Whatever goes on up there in our head, our brain short circuits, and it tells us to drink when we don't really want to drink. So we do not have a mental defense against the first drink. I can't think my way out of drinking. Then it says, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. That means I can't use my human power. I can't use my willpower. I can't use my choice. It's not going to work. It says his defense must come from a higher power. According to this book, if I don't get a higher power in my life, I'm not going to have a defense against the first drink. That's really, really important. You can't fix self with self. You need a higher power. That's basically the whole process that AA is founded on. We need a power greater than ourselves because we don't have enough power to defeat alcoholism. All right. Thanks a lot for letting me share. That's all I got.
Thanks, Bill.
Yep. Thank you, Bill. All right. Well, we will close with the serenity prayer and then open everything up.
Okay. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Thanks, Leo. Great job.
Yeah. Thank you.